There is a man in Ohio who turned down $40,000 for a rusted 1967 Mustang that barely runs. His wife thinks he is irrational. His friends think he has lost his mind. But what if he understands something about human psychology that most people never figure out? Most of us have been conditioned to see cars as tools. You buy them, you use them, you replace them. But there exists a specific type of person who looks at a machine with scratched paint, worn leather seats, and a complicated past, and feels something almost spiritual pulling them in. This is not random. This is not a quirk. This is one of the most fascinating psychological profiles you will ever encounter. The relationship between humans and objects is far older and far deeper than modern science has wanted to admit. For most of human history, objects were not disposable. A sword passed down through generations carried the weight of every hand that held it. A farmhouse built by a great-grandfather was not just shelter, it was identity made physical. We have always attached meaning to things. But the modern world tried to strip that instinct away from us, replacing depth with convenience and meaning with efficiency. Some people refuse to let that happen, and they found their resistance living in old cars. When a person connects deeply with a car that has history, what is actually happening inside their brain is something psychologists call narrative transportation. The human mind does not just process facts, it processes stories. And an old car with a past is one of the most powerful story objects that exists in everyday life. Every dent has a question behind it. Every faded color has a decade attached to it. Every worn gear shift has thousands of hands it remembers. The person drawn to that car is not just buying metal and rubber. They are buying an unfinished novel and casting themselves as the next chapter. This matters because identity is not just about who you are, it is about what you carry. Psychologists who study self-continuity theory have found that human beings have a profound need to feel connected across time, to their past selves, to history, and to something that will outlast them. An old car satisfies all three of those needs simultaneously. It reaches back into a time the owner may never have lived through, creates a present-day sense of purpose through restoration or preservation, and promises a future where the story continues beyond its current keeper. That man in Ohio is not being irrational. He is being deeply, almost instinctively human. Now here is where the psychology gets uncomfortable, because this attachment is not always healthy, and the line between passion and obsession is thinner than most people in the classic car community want to admit. There is a concept in behavioral psychology called the endowment effect. Once a person owns something, they overvalue it. They assign it worth that exists almost entirely inside their own emotional architecture, rather than in any objective market. The car becomes a mirror. And what they see in that mirror is themselves, their memories, their values, their story. When someone threatens that mirror, whether through a lowball offer or a dismissive comment, the response is not about the car anymore. It is about identity protection. The aggression some collectors display when their vehicles are criticized makes perfect sense when you understand that they are not defending an object. They are defending a version of themselves. But there is another layer here that almost nobody talks about. People who love cars with history tend to share a specific psychological trait that researchers have linked to what is called an experiential mindset. They are not materialists in the traditional sense. Paradoxically, they are experience seekers who have found a physical object that delivers emotional and experiential value rather than status value. Studies on consumer psychology consistently show that experiences make people happier than possessions. Old car lovers seem to have unconsciously cracked that code. They do not just own the car, they live inside the story it tells. Think about the difference between buying a brand new luxury vehicle and spending the same money restoring a 1969 Chevrolet Camaro that was found in a barn. The new car delivers comfort, reliability, and social status. The restored Camaro delivers mystery, purpose, craftsmanship, connection, and a story that people will ask about for the rest of your life. One satisfies the surface, the other feeds something underneath. The people most drawn to historically significant cars also score unusually high in a personality trait called openness to experience. They are curious, they are comfortable with complexity and ambiguity, They do not need things to be neat or new or simple. They actually prefer richness over comfort, which is why they will spend 3 years hunting down the correct factory original bolts for a restoration when a modern replacement would work perfectly fine. It is not about function. It has never been about function. It is about fidelity to a truth they feel responsible to preserve. And that sense of responsibility is itself a psychological phenomenon worth examining. There is a term called stewardship psychology, and it describes the emotional stance of someone who sees themselves not as an owner, but as a temporary caretaker of something larger than themselves. Museum curators feel it, historians feel it, and a very specific kind of car lover feels it too. They believe the car existed before them, will exist after them, and that their role is not to consume it, but to honor it. That belief fundamentally changes the relationship between person and object in a way that most modern consumer psychology cannot even account for. This is also why these individuals often feel a strange grief when they sell a beloved vehicle. The research on anticipatory loss shows that people can mourn the future absence of something while it is still in their possession. And when the car finally leaves, what follows is not relief or indifference. It is something that resembles the loss of a relationship, because in a very real psychological sense, that is exactly what it is. There is also the community dimension that fuels all of this. Human beings are tribal by nature. We seek belonging through shared values and shared language. The classic car world has developed its own culture, its own hierarchy, its own rituals of knowledge and respect. Knowing the difference between a numbers-matching restoration and a resto mod is not just technical knowledge, it is social currency, it is membership. And for people who may feel out of place in mainstream consumer culture, this community offers something rare, a place where depth is rewarded and disposability is viewed with contempt. The psychological profile that emerges across all of these threads is surprisingly consistent. People who love cars with history tend to be meaning-driven, identity-conscious, experience-seeking, responsibility-oriented individuals who feel deeply uncomfortable with a culture that treats everything as temporary and replaceable. The car is not the point. The car is the vehicle, in every sense of the word, for something they cannot find anywhere else. So what does this tell us about the rest of us? Perhaps the most unsettling implication of all of this psychology is not about car collectors at all. It is about what their passion reveals about modern life. When a person goes to extraordinary lengths, financial sacrifice, years of labor, endless searching, to preserve and restore a machine from the past, they are making a statement about value that cuts directly against the culture of constant upgrade and relentless novelty. They are saying that some things deserve to last, that stories matter, that the history embedded in an object has worth that cannot be calculated and should not be abandoned. In a world that increasingly measures value in newness and convenience, these people are doing something quietly radical. They are choosing depth over speed, memory over trend, meaning over efficiency. The man in Ohio still has his rusted 1967 Mustang. He still turns down offers.
And every weekend, he goes into his garage, puts on old music, and works on something most people would have sent to the junkyard years ago. His neighbors still think he is strange, but maybe the stranger thing is that the rest of us forgot how to care about something that much.